Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and today we finally have to talk about Elon Musk's Twitter purchase. And I wanted to give this like a day or so to just kind of mull this over, do some reading about it, all those kinds of things, because I think we have a problem here in a way that I think a lot of people really aren't talking about, except those really in cybersecurity that have been writing or talking publicly about this. And I think the general public just doesn't understand some of this. Now, before I actually dive into that, I think we have to address a couple of concerns here. First things first, we have two sides of this coin. First one is political. Obviously, we have seen essentially, reactions from both, at least here in the United States, the left and right political spectrum, from extreme to moderate. And basically one side thinks, oh my God, this is the end of the world in some way, shape, or form, and this is going to explode misinformation, disinformation, all those different kinds of things. The other side said, oh, this is going to be great. It's going to be pure free speech. All those kinds of things. And I think that's one side of the coin. But what I'm focusing on today, for the most part, is the actual technical side of this when it comes to cybersecurity and privacy. Now, to begin, obviously one of the biggest concerns here with the situation is that Elon Musk, essentially, this is on the political side. Before we dive into the tech side, Elon Musk is a self-styled free speech absolutist. And so, as I mentioned, there's a fear here that he could essentially turn back the dials on things like content moderation, which obviously would undo a ton of work that Twitter had done to do things like curb misinformation and disinformation, which are actual known existing things. Outside of free speech, a willing intent to deceive with disinformation, does it necessarily fall under free speech? And I think that's a discussion that we need to have, not to mention things like hate speech and all those kinds of things. And interestingly enough, essentially when, and again, I'm not trying to get political here, but we kind of have to, is when the right basically split from Twitter and said, you know what, they punted off President Trump, and a lot of people left, the reports of things like anger, hatred, vitriol, and all that kind of stuff went down. Now, I'm not blaming the right, solely for that. I think everybody is involved in this in the same way that I think you would see a lot of the vitriol go down if the left abandoned Twitter and left that and abandoned Twitter, and then the right stayed on. I think you would see similar numbers, because essentially what you now have is an echo chamber. And we are seeing this right now with Trump's Truth Social. That basically has, I don't want to say been dead on arrival, but it has not performed nearly as expected, with basically a pittance of people. And by a pittance, I mean, I think a couple million at most. I don't even think Trump himself is really using that platform. And now Elon Musk is talking about unbanning Trump. What would that do to his social media platform? I think these are things, that really need to be discussed. I know Michael Smerconish on his own radio show earlier today was talking about that. So this is something that we really have to understand. Now, for those people that say, oh, he's an absolute free speech absolutist, especially on the right, oh, he's going to bring back total free speech. I can do whatever I want. I can say whatever I want. No, I don't think he's going to do that. I really don't. I don't think he's going to blow away content moderation, despite his claims of being a quote-unquote free speech absolutist, because that would probably tank Twitter and he would lose billions of dollars. And so what I think we're going to see are superficial changes only to this. Now, those superficial changes may be bringing back, the former president, and the former president, rails every day. I mean, he was posting sometimes, I believe, hundreds of tweets on a day, and now that, he's got this entire charge of the stolen election, all of that, basically users on Twitter don't want to see that happen. But would he abandon Truth Social to come back to Twitter? I think the former president would, because that's where there's a lot more people. Truth Social, again, is not doing well. I wrote an article why I thought it was destined to fail, and quite frankly, I've been right. So there you go. Now, with that, we want to switch to the actual technical side of this, because that's where I'm focused. And I've said it a million times, but cybersecurity is agnostic to politics. I don't care if you're on the right or the left, but we're not immune from it, which is why I address those first. But this is what I actually want to talk about. And the primary concern that we in cybersecurity have isn't so much, things like the security settings, that Musk said, he's planning on changing, and, all those kinds of things, or the bringing back of Trump. What we are concerned about has to do with the proprietary code that runs Twitter. Now, one of his many proposed plans, Elon Musk's many proposed plans, is essentially to create the, or take the algorithmic code that runs Twitter and make it publicly available in what is known as open source software, meaning you, I, and anybody on the planet can actually read the actual code that makes Twitter Twitter, how the algorithms run, how the platform works, all those kinds of things. Now, Elon Musk claims that this change, and for the record, Twitter was actually thinking about this before Musk and this entire situation, but Musk claims that this change will help boost trust in the platform, meaning if you can transparently see what's going on in Twitter, specifically the code, then you know how you're being data mined or not, those kinds of things. But don't forget, though, that for years, Twitter has faced an onslaught of fake news, like disinformation intentionally. That's information with the intent, knowing intent to deceive, not to mention security incidents and breaches, including one where attackers hijacked high-profile Twitter accounts, including Elon Musk's, to promote a cryptocurrency scam. I remember talking about that when basically Bill Gates's account came out and said, "Hey, I'm Bill Gates. Like, send me a cryptocurrency and I'll send you back 5," or whatever the scam was. And these were all hijacked accounts. Now, the cybersecurity community also fears that Elon Musk turning Twitter open source could make the platform more susceptible to attack. Now, think about it this way. We in the cybersecurity community and the world just went through a massive vulnerability disaster that saw criminals and intelligence agencies leveraging open source software known as Log4j that was basically baked into millions of programs, and they used this vulnerability, which was an insanely high vulnerability, to get into basically everything that didn't have Log4j updated to protect this. This was known as the Log4Shell vulnerability, and there was a new one called Spring4Shell, but the Log4Shell vulnerability was insanely severe. Many sleepless nights for IT and cybersecurity personnel. Now, with Twitter being open source, potentially anybody malicious or an intelligence agency could find a huge vulnerability that everybody at Twitter's security and development simply missed, and then start exploiting it to get into accounts or even the infrastructure itself, meaning they're not going to report this as researchers to make it publicly known so that Twitter can fix itself. They're going to use it to exploit the platform for as long as they can, and that is a huge concern. Now, on top of this, if the algorithms that run Twitter in terms of things like post prioritization or how they control which content is shared more widely are now open source, people could figure out actually how to game the system, meaning that intelligence agency that's spreading disinformation, if they find something that they can tweak in open source or exploit around, they can make themselves go viral in a way that they probably previously wouldn't have been able to. Now, this could lead, obviously, to other things like criminals getting basically their tweet with an infected link out to the public as well, and that's assuming that Twitter eventually catches it, but it may not even be caught. These are things that we are potentially talking about when this goes open source, if it goes open source. And on top of this, our friends over at the Electronic Frontier Foundation, love those guys, voice concern that Elon Musk may not have considered the ramifications of what a lack of anonymity can basically have, or rather the effect that a lack of anonymity can have on a certain group of people or certain groups of people. Basically, this stems from Elon Musk's desire to fight bot traffic, which obviously everybody's a fan of fighting bot traffic. Bots are awful. However, if it requires everybody to use and verify their real names, then people living under oppressive regimes may not be able to use Twitter to share with the world things like the human rights violations of their government, since they can't be anonymous. These are things that we actually have to take into account because, quite frankly, the Electronic Frontier Foundation is correct. We need privacy, but we also want to get, around the bots, meaning we want to kill all of the bot traffic. That in and of itself could be a benefit to authoritarian regimes as they now know who is a dissident, but also because less of their information is being spread publicly about their dealings, like human rights violations. If the people don't feel comfortable blasting this out on Twitter, where news outlets around the globe can pick it up or human rights groups can monitor these things, then how are they going to know it's happening? That benefits authoritarians. On top of this, we already have existing technologies out there that can help fight bot traffic by giving us both a unique coded ID and be anonymous in a way that bots simply can't. Therefore, it could kill bot traffic. If Twitter were to integrate, and I actually tweeted this at Elon Musk the other day, if Twitter was integrating a platform called Human ID or another platform called Typing DNA, I think both of them would be real good boons for this. Then what we can do is start cutting down that bot traffic, because the bot traffic can't create a Human ID on the Human ID platform, nor would they be able to basically spoof a Typing DNA, another really interesting company. So there is technology out there that can essentially give us a unique and anonymous identity and validate us with essentially a human way to ID us, which is how we type. So I think these are things that we should be looking at, we should be promoting, we should be telling Twitter, you need this. And obviously, if you're cutting down on bot traffic, you're cutting down on the population of a social media platform. But quite frankly, if the social media platform is free of bots, you'd have to imagine even more people would want to sign up to fill that gap, because they're not going to be dealing with the onslaught of disinformation, misinformation, and the crap that all of these intelligence agencies, not to mention criminals, are using these bots for. So this is something to consider. I think these are the real issues with Elon Musk. You can get into a political fight about free speech or how he's going to basically ruin the platform or elevate the platform or whatever that is. My biggest fear here is that we are going to see a ramp up of exactly what he doesn't want to have happen, which is intrusions into the platform and basically figuring out ways around their defenses by making it open source. That's a huge problem. And now you know. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please stay private. Thanks, everyone.